Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to present the brief scientific content of our component. My name is Endre Horvath, and I'm a postdoctoral scientist in Professor Lateral Force Group since 2009. Before, I was at the University of Szeged in Hungary, where I finished my master studies as environmentalist, and then I was enrolled in the chemistry PhD school, and I defended my thesis there, working on different nanomaterials. But today, the topic will be solution-grown nanowires for energy and environment, which is kind of will be a broad presentation, but specific results will be linked to this project. So, as last time mentioned, then we heard that our laboratory has a kind of multidisciplinary approach to deal with several problems, and it has we have a large palette of different materials that we are synthesizing, from nanomaterials like the carbon nanotube forest, titanium oxide nanowires, as well as single crystals, because sometimes you need to go back and understand simple things on the level of single crystals, and then go to more complicated systems. So since we are, the topic or the project was within the last 5 years, carbon nanomaterials for energy, solar energy application. Let me just recap the Nobel Prize winners in 1996, and they got because of the discovery of fullerenes, the buckyballs, and just to mention Richard E. Smalley, one of the gentlemen who got the Nobel Prize, a shared Nobel Prize. He wrote an article with this title, "The Future Global Energy Prosperity, the Terawatt Challenge." This is a really good article. I suggest everyone to read it. And this article, he mentioned the top 10 world issues that we need to deal with. Of course, we hear every day in the news that with the projection of the population of the Earth will reach 10 billion at some point. But which year exactly, we don't know yet, but it will certainly reach 10 billion. And with the increasing population, we will need more and more energy. And he calculated that for this 10 billion people, we will need 60 terawatt power. So where to get 60 terawatt? That's now the issue. And he mentioned that the first problem we need to deal with is energy. Then the rest probably we can solve. So water and food. Of course, how we can fill this gap, what we need? Renewables, biomass, wind, what we have on the palette, biomass, wind, geothermal, hydroelectric, tide, ocean currents, and solar. After analyzing all these energy sources, it came out that the answer should be, or probably it will be, the fusion. But the fusion in the sense that solar, like the sun. The sun is a gigantic, it's a monster nuclear reactor, and it's going to be here for a couple of billion years. So just to, you see here, this is the size of the Earth, and just one part of the sun. So this giant nuclear reactor provides us every day 165,000 terawatts in every moment when the sun is shining. What we need about is 20 terawatts, so it's only the fraction what we need from this energy. And he has this famous map just to illustrate the possibility in solar power, in solar energy, that if we could, with the current technology, the current solar cell technology, which is, for example, let's assume it's 10%. The current silicon solar cell on the roof of PPFL, they are around 20, so more efficient. But let's assume only 10%. He calculated that if we put 6 squares, and all of these squares are in desert, so the real estate is quite cheap. If we put 6 squares there, each has a side of 100 kilometers, then we could provide the 20 terawatt, only with one source. And of course, the rest of the renewables are still there. So this is just the possibility in solar, which I would like to outline that all these, what we were dealing with within the last 5 years, probably will not bring the solution, but hopefully we'll put a little brick to solve this problem. So let's list again the first two problems, the energy and water. There is one material which could play a role to solve these two problems, and this name we'll hear and we heard already, this titanium dioxide. It's almost everywhere. It's probably there are around 100 grams on the paintings here, in this plastic in the fridge, in your phone, in the tattooage, in the sunscreen. And believe me or not, if you like the M&M sugars or marshmallows, you're also eating titanium dioxide because it has a E number of E171. It's a food coloring agent. So we are producing 5.5 million tons per year. It's a humanity yearly production, and it's a $7 billion business. What does it mean, 5.5 billion? It's equal to 800 Olympic-sized swimming pool. And I would like to outline that the particle size of this compound, this powder, is micron size, and it's spherical. So what we are producing in the laboratory is not spherical, but elongated. So we are producing titanium nanowires, the elongated version of this compound. It has a special layer structure, which we can use later for doping, and I will show you how. From the couple of hundred of milligrams production, we scaled up in the laboratory, and now we can make around 1 kilogram per week. So this shows us that we are confident that if there is a real industrial application, this material, the production would be even further scaled up. Okay, we have the compound. We can process them. It's very important. We can make thin films. We can make 3D objects, use as a suspension, and also freestanding films, no substrate. Here we have a substrate, glass or a functional substrate. Here there is no substrate. Even you can make a so-called nano paper out of it. And where are we using this compound? We're trying to implement them as sensors and detectors, memristors. This is a future logic element of computing. And of course, solar environmental purification, or this is the synonym of photocatalysis, and solar cells. Dye-sensitized solar cells in collaboration with the great solute. First, I will show some results in the thematics of solar environmental purification. Of course, this is just some statistical numbers. According to United Nations General Assembly, around 800 million people lack access to safe drinking water. And it's not only the drinking water the problem, but the air. In some regions of the world, of course, the population is just increasing, and we have a huge amount of pollution in Asia, but even sometimes in Paris you hear that only the numbers, the cars with pairs can circulate and not the rest. What about water? The World Bank estimates that 25% of diseases in India are related to unsafe water. And there, the UNICEF estimates that every year about 600,000 children die because of diarrhea and pneumonia. Where we live here in Europe, it's really difficult to accept that these numbers are real numbers. So what we can do, for example, what is the state of the art now in photocatalysis? These are the applications, these are the products already on the market. You can buy titanium dioxide coated glass, and this is a so-called self-cleaning glass. You don't need to clean the glass so often. You can use in paintings and cover complete buildings, and this building is not, because they live and fly during the night, they have very good sight, but they have very good sight because they have special structures on the surface, and they can capture all the photons and reduce the reflection. So we try to engineer our titanium dioxide film to get these properties. Here the idea was that you lose some photons always by direct reflection or some transmission. So if you can manage to increase the scattering rate within your film, probably you will harvest those photons and they will create free radicals, so you enhance the catalytic activity. Here you see a titanium dioxide film, and for the first time, at least, I'm working like in the last 10 years with titanium dioxide, I never seen colorful titanium dioxide. for the first time by structural engineering in the surface, we render them colorful. So what you see here is an iridescent color, which is, if you are lucky, and you shine onto this sample a light from your phone,
I know it.
then you can see these colors as a function of angle. So you have to find a magic angle and have a good light source. So probably you need your phone, and it is not really strong. We tested it in photocatalysis, and it turned out that the layer which had a lot of these kind of defects and the internal scattering was increased, it was more effective in photocatalysis. Of course, it's quite simple. In this case, the amount of the sample was the same as here, but we lost a lot of photons by direct reflection or transmission. The second method was the oxygen, so-called oxygen vacancy doping. Since we have titanium oxide nanowires, a lot of atoms are on the surface. It means if we are able to remove some oxygens from the surface, then we render this titanium dioxide blue without any doping. This is only self-doping. We take out some oxygen and we create titanium 3+ species. And this will create these color centers in the material. There are theoretical calculations that it creates shallow states and infrared states within the semiconductor. And when we tested the photocatalytic activity, the blue titanium dioxide was more active as compared to the white one. This one was with doping. Here is a case when we use the ion exchange properties of titanium nanotubes to put manganese into the structure, and that the manganese was homogeneously doped within the framework was proven by EPR, electron spin resonance, by Peter Szirmai and Bálint Nafradi. Another, we can use alkali doping. Here we increase so much the doping alkali ion concentration that we completely render the titanium oxide into strontium titanate. So this is a new type of elongated strontium titanate nanowires, what we've been synthesized. And the other is the decorating. Usually people, they use platinum, rhodium, palladium, gold, silver, nanoparticles to put on the surface, and where you put it, then you can create this local electric field which could help you in the exciton dissociation and increase the photocatalytic activity. So finally, when we put together all these strategies, we ended up with a so-called optimized catalyst. It's black because it contains carbon nanotubes as well. You don't see the titanium because it's white. And this catalyst was, in our experiment, twice as active as a so-called Degussa P25 or Evonik P25. In the photocatalyst, that's a reference material to compare every time in your system because all the reactors are different. Of course, we had a control, only aluminum. If you want to purify water or air, you need to test your material. What is the sterilization efficiency? And we tested by using E. coli bacteria, and what we have found that our composite successfully killed the E. coli bacteria with UV light, but surprisingly with visible light as well. So for visible light, we needed like 2 minutes, for UV light 15 seconds, and there was no countable bacteria on the surface. So that was about solar environmental purification. Let's just briefly mention the solar cell work, which was in collaboration with Michael Gretzel's group just in front of the building in chemistry. So as you might know, this solar cell type belongs to the family of third generation solar cells, and sometimes it's called artificial photosynthesis. How you build the solar cells? In a laboratory, it looks like this, if someone wants to see them. So you need 2 transparent electrodes, titanium dioxide layer, a dye, and the redox electrolyte. Why it's artificial photosynthesis? Because of the dye. All the dyes are now synthetic, but historically they've proven that it works with chlorophyll and bacteria photosynthetic center as well. So this technology is already in the market. Recently, as László mentioned, they installed 300 square meters on on the facade of the EPS Convention Center. The beauty is that they can have different colors. I think they installed 3 different colors: blue, green, and red colors. They can be transparent. You can use them as a decoration. But these panels, the average efficiency is around 7%. You can find this technology on sport bags or the iPad keyboard power, or some other laptops. How they look like, as I mentioned, it has a sandwich structure. You need to build these layers one by one, and then when you complete the laboratory cells, they are tiny ones like this, 5 by 5 millimeter. What we wanted to do is, currently they are using titanium oxide nanoparticles in the cell. We wanted to try out how the nanowires perform, because they can be, if you imagine titanium oxide nanoparticles attached to each other, this is a kind of disordered system. You have many green boundaries. Unlike this system here, you have a direct highway to conduct the electrons until the light-induced charges. They travel until the electrodes, and you can probably use them without, or not without, but with reduced losses as compared to the other system. So in around 2010, we implemented the nanowires in so-called solid-state dye-synthesized solar cell, where we reached efficiencies of 4.5. At that time, it was just below the record. The record was 5.1%. So because of the 0.2%, we couldn't publish it as higher impact journal than the ACS Nano, but we were quite happy with that. What we found, that what was the key of the high efficiency, that these nanowires are themselves like a single crystals. But when you create your film, you aggregate them, and it turned out that the grain boundaries between the wires, they are either low angle grain boundaries or perfect grain boundaries. So this is the high resolution TM image of one wire and the second one here as well. So probably here you see the lattice fringes. They are completely parallel. Here's the grain boundary, but it has exactly the same orientation. So this, we think that this was the key for the success. So we studied more in details the aggregation of this system, because the aggregation will determine the porosity of your film and the pore size distribution, and the grain boundaries. We've seen that they had a really important effect. Teamed up with a specialist in Geneva, we studied from A to Z all the aggregation properties of this system in liquids. This is also very important if you want to do photocatalysis in liquid and suspensions. When you want to separate the nanoparticles from your sludge, that's a very important and very crucial problem from the practicability point of view. Because if you deal with nanomaterials and then you want to use this liquid, you don't want to discharge nanomaterials into environment. So you need to separate them. And here you see a special example where you, for example, add a well-known flocculating agent, sodium chloride, how immediately you destabilize the nanoparticle system, and you can reuse it with a gentle centrifugation. This is just a schematics of the method called optical tracking, PFM, photonic fluid microscope. This is a laser, and with this laser you can trap particles and move them, place them in the liquid where you want. Within this project we developed the electrode part, so not the heart, but the electrodes. If you want to have flexible solar cell, you would need flexible glass, but flexible glass doesn't really exist. So that's why you need alternative materials. And carbon nanotubes, graphene, they are one of the promising candidates to make such kind of film. So here we use the extremely long multiple carbon nanotubes, carbon nanotube forest. We detached it from the substrate, suspended, and printed the suspension on a polymer film. So now you have this thin layer which is transparent and good conductor. And we deposited this ceramic, which is like the IT or FTO, the conductive glass, on the surface. Here is without carbon nanotube scaffold, and this picture is with carbon nanotube scaffold. And we tested the fatigue. So it turned out that, of course, if you deposit a rigid brittle ceramic on the surface of the plastic, when you bend it, you see the grain boundaries or the cracks. And this material, if you bend it with a radius of curvature of 2 millimeters, it lost quickly the conductivity. But the other sample here, I don't know if you can see, but the carbon nanotube composite, the hybrid thin film, had much better resistance. And this is because of the carbon nanotube were stabilizing the crystals and bridging the gaps which were opening. So when you go back, you recover some conductivity. So I won't make a conclusion, but just I would like to outline that now, as Laszlo mentioned, there is a new material on the ground. So there is a paradigm change in the DSSC field. A new solid compound called organometal perovskite reached and break all the efficiencies in the last 5 years what they were reaching with conventional techniques. It's already 20%, and this will be the topic of the collaboration with the kind of follow-up of this Cis-Hungarian project. Of course, I would like to acknowledge all my colleagues working within the 5 years, diploma workers, TP4 students, partially PhD student on the project, and I would like to thank you for your attention.